name's Gianna. I'm the Esports Lab Coordinator here at the University of Cincinnati. so sorry. It'll pop up in a second. I used to be a competitive collegiate esports player, helped with coaching before leaning a little bit more towards event organization, social media for both UC Esports and the external collegiate leagues. So we're really putting this on to help elevate the community. I'm happy that everyone here is, sorry about the sound. Happy that everyone here is hopping on this bullet train. And just really quickly, congratulations to your administration for taking this massive step. Once again, apologies for the sound. Thank you for those in chat who let me know. Rule number 1 of broadcast, remember to unmute your mic. So when I think of esports, I think of 3 things: community, celebration, and competition. Esports is an evolving scene, and Scholastic Esports is no different. It just began as an expression, led by students, and it's now grown into a $500 million industry. So this is an awesome quote by the former CEO of ESPN and the NFL Network, Steve Bornstein. He says, "I believe esports will rival the biggest traditional sports leagues in terms of future opportunities." And so this is an awesome step in just traditional sports, showing respect and recognition for just the growth of esports overall. And so I want to start off with some quick points, so then people can, write down any that you might find interesting, just on the global and national level to show how much larger esports has gotten. So there's over 500 million fans worldwide. Esports viewership has beat out all traditional U.S. sports viewership, with the only exceptions being the NFL, and that's really just because of the Super Bowl. There's an estimated $2.4 billion in the esports industry revenue for 2024, and this is projected to grow to $6.2 billion for the next 5 years. 10% of all U.S. sports viewing was for esports, and that was around 3 billion hours watched. That's absolutely massive. And the current largest esports prize pool stands around $41 million. That was the 2019 League of Legends World Cup. There's over 100 million concurrent viewers for that event. And it's something that a lot of people don't realize, but the U.S. esports betting market was valued at $11.3 billion in 2023. And this is also projected to grow to $33 billion for the next 6 years. So to put into perspective, the NFL revenue grows about $2 billion each year, and they've been established for decades. So esports is really blowing up in terms of how popular it is, the revenue growth of it, and just the viewership. So I kind of wanted to go over just the agenda of what we're going to be covering today. The first is going to be elevating your game, talking about expanding your program, and then how to rein in the community a little bit. And then some best practices. And we're going to go over some stuff involving leadership, some stuff about strategy, coordination, and also inclusion in your programs. And then I'm going to show you some pathways, and that's going to be some leagues and organizations, both local and global, a pathway to professional esports players that you can help use to encourage your students, and then also passion to profession, which is basically the careers that can stem from gaming. And I'm also going to give you some coaching tips from the Cincinnati Fear assistant coach. And Cincinnati Fear is the professional esports team out of Cincinnati, so they're an awesome local team. I hope everyone supports them. And then we're going to talk about some resources, and then we're going to end with a Q&A. So if you have any questions about any of the stuff I mentioned throughout this entire presentation, you can just hold it till the end. There is going to be a quick trivia section some point through this PowerPoint, so I will be reacting with the chat a little bit on that one, but we'll get to that. So elevating the game. Expanding your program. The first thing is going to be enhancing facilities and equipment. If you don't have an esports lab or you don't have computers, now would be a great time to start doing this. And this is really dependent on engagement. Next is going to be diversifying the titles that your program offers, offering more for whatever your students are really interested in. And then develop, skill-based teams. You have your varsity team, your JV team, your freshman team, etc. And then growing the community and having engagement. And this can be highlighting team achievements and opening the floor for, casual events to gain interest from hesitant students. And, this list is not sequential. you really have to ask yourself, do you have enough interest and involvement where teams or players are being limited to the time they can spend using the equipment so your other teams can play? Are you running out of space to host your activity? If funding is an issue, we can try and provide solutions. We're always open at the UC Innovation Lab, to let students kind of test out the equipment and see what they really like. Surrounding the community. Esports unites students. It is an absolutely community-based event and sport. An awesome stat that I found by NASEF, 82% of coaches observed that esports positively impacted their players' school attendance. And that same survey found that school districts reported competitive esports students outperformed regular students 100% in both attendance and suspension rates. So these kids aren't just showing up to school, but they're also behaving very well because of esports. And there is a direct correlation. So esports can really help rein in your community, help students on an academic basis, which I think is absolutely awesome. I think that's something that, especially if you already have a program, that's something to really hone in on. So now we're going to talk about some best practices, and this is going to be a bit expansive. So this really boils down into 4 key areas. Leadership, which is you. We want to help you improve as either a coach or as a parent supporting your child or a faculty member supporting esports as a whole. Strategy, coordination, and then inclusion. Now I'll break down what each of these are when we get to them. So leadership. Conditioning. This is something that a lot of people don't really think about, but esports players are mental athletes. Having healthy physical habits like diet, exercise, sleep can greatly impact performance. There's a local company out of Cincinnati called Fit Gamer, and they also go into this heavily with their own resources about how having, a good sleep cycle, having a better diet, getting kids out and exercising is really, really important. And that's something that I always tell coaches to heavily stress is that, if a kid's staying up until 2 or 3 in the morning, they're not going to perform well, not just, in their sport, but they're also not going to perform well academically, and they're not really going to have a great time. So next is communication, listening to players and providing feedback. Have players explain to you, why they want to go with certain strategies or plays to help build leadership and in-game confidence in students. Communication should be like this constant feedback loop between both the players to each other and players to the coach. Question, listen, provide feedback, repeat. This not only allows players to feel more confident in their own game knowledge, almost like studying, but it also helps coaches who know a little about the game to improve their understanding to later help the students who are struggling in their gameplay. And I include empathy on here too. Just because I find that it's a bit of an underplayed feature to have, especially as like a coach, but showing students that you care about how they feel is extremely important for esports students. A lot of these kids started playing video games as an escape from real world issues, they may have been facing. Esports is still fairly new to the scholastic scene, and it is looked down upon by a lot of parents and traditional sports athletes. It's not physically demanding. Although these opinions tend to not consider the amount of dedication and hours these players put into improving their skills and honing their skills. And then IGLing. So IGLing means in-game leader. And so this is something that's not really typical that applies to, coaches, but it heavily applies to competing players. And this is an important role that I wanted to mention to coaches to really understand and then encourage in their players. This role helps promote a team's independence from having to constantly receive feedback from the coach, and it forces players to be more self-aware about what they're doing. Next is strategy. So team building, understanding team composition, assigning roles, and building cohesion in a roster. And this is also kind of getting back to the fact of like when you start to expand your program, you're not going to be able to just throw together 5 kids on a team and then just have them go at it, You have to start understanding how each player, what weaknesses they have, what strengths they have, how to make a good team. And then from there, maybe you have to assign some roles. And then from there, it's building trust on a roster, which can help them be more cohesive together. And then game analysis. Creating strategies and then having a team be strategic while they play is almost always going to beat out teams that just have raw talent, And that is just training your kids to have in-game adaptability, finding the meta, as one might say, is going to be really, really impactful to bringing your teams to the next level on their competitive play. And this is also something that ties heavily into collegiate as well. So if your students want to go and play collegiate or professionally, they're really going to have to start learning how to understand strategies, understand how to adapt in-game, and then be able to play with other players that they might not be super comfortable with, just so, it pushes everyone outside their comfort zone and makes them better overall. Next, I want to talk about coordination. And practices and matches are going to be really, really important with this, like learning how to practice, especially since esports isn't a traditional sport. Have a routine, create a structure that you and the players can follow to help better equip everyone for the future. Preparing for matches, finding out what really works for everybody. Do they have to play a different game to warm up their hands? Do they have to sit and listen to music for a little bit? Do they have to scrimmage beforehand? Really understanding what the team needs and what the players need is going to be really important, especially when it comes to elevating, the level that you're playing at in some of these leagues, especially on the scholastic level. Schooling. This is something that I always stress regardless of what level, people are playing at in esports. Balancing school and competition, especially with video games because it's such a casual space. A lot of kids are going to want to go home and just play and play and play and practice, but really stressing finding good habits about how to balance both school and competition is really important, because it also applies to like the collegiate scene and the professional scene as well. As you can't just go and play all the time, even though it might be your favorite thing ever. So building those habits with your players is going to be really important. And I always suggest heavily, having study time, like monitoring the students. I'm not saying necessarily holding their hands, but really trying to help instill those good habits in them. And then networking. Connecting with other coaches and building the community overall is going to be so helpful, especially when it comes to, if you have to find scrimmages, find local competitions that you might want to play in. Also sharing failures and successes. This is going to be so helpful, so then you can skip a couple stepping stones along the way, if you find out what other people are failing at or succeeding at. So inclusion. Metric growth is the main thing that I like to say under inclusion, and that's tracking player participation and retention rates, addressing the turnover rate. If your program is constantly having students not return and it's not because of graduation, then something there is wrong. Another good focus is also growth in female and minority player representation. That's extremely important, especially in the esports world. And why is it important? Well, it doesn't just create a safe and welcoming space that's more tolerant, but it also, opens up the teams to have a larger pool of perspectives when creating new strategies. And that's really, really important. Recent studies show that about 45% of all gamers identify as female compared to 55% who identify as male. And this is good because this trend has been steadily increasing every year. However, less than 10% of competitive esports players are women, and that has not been steadily increasing. So this kind of change with the esports community is something that can very easily start at the scholastic level by, targeting metric growth in some of these communities that otherwise have not been, playing much. So next I want to talk about some pathways. And the first thing I wanted to mention was like some leagues and organizations. And so for those of you who are in Ohio, the Ohio Athletic Association, they recognize esports as a varsity sport in 2023. And they have also partnered with Esports Ohio to, facilitate awesome competition to over 500 schools across the state. They host regional tournaments, they host championships, they have an awesome league with some very passionate people. And I always recommend anybody who's in Ohio, if you can play in Esports Ohio. And the next organization I wanted to mention is Play Versus. Now, if you're looking for a secondary league to, put your team in to really have them elevate themselves, this is a great free alternative for these, middle and high school teams. Another league is the High School Esports League, and this is the largest and longest running esports organization for middle and high schools. competing in esports. Another awesome thing about them is that they've also distributed over $700,000 in esports scholarships. So they are giving a lot of awesome opportunities to a lot of these students. So that's just something I wanted to mention. And the last organization is the NASEF. They are my go-to organization for looking for studies, looking for surveys between coaches, parents, faculty members, administrators, like team players, both on the scholastic space and the collegiate space, about, really how to just elevate the community as a whole. They really help provide perspective on, the best practices of like a program or as a coach or as a player. And I always like to bring them up to really give people a good resource to look at if they're trying to look for some more stuff. So next I wanted to mention was your path to pro. So there is no direct scholastic to collegiate to professional pipeline currently in esports, which is very unfortunate. There are a lot of organizations who are trying to standardize this. I know NECC is trying to standardize this, and a lot of private colleges are trying to fuel their esports programs to play at like the semi-professional level. But currently there's no transfer portals, there's no drafts or anything like that. So something I want to mention is kind of a breakdown of how professional esports works, just so then you can also fill in some of your more passionate students who are looking to maybe take the next step in the future in their career of esports. So I wanted to mention the tiers. So professional esports on a tiered level. So first you have T3, and these are kind of combination teams, primarily made with players who are either in the collegiate space or they have zero, experience playing in a professional league. They play in smaller tournaments. If they do play in a league, it's never an official league, and they're kind of almost like your ragtag team of friends who play on the weekends. Your next is going to be your T2. This is your semi-professional teams that mainly consist of, your free agents or players. They didn't make it to pro, but they're still very good. There are specific leagues for T2, but playing in T2 does not necessarily guarantee a player is going to get picked up by a T1 team. But there are more, pathways to become fully professional by entering the T2 space. And then lastly is going to be T1. And these are teams in a professional organization chosen by a franchised league, which franchised league is an esports league that's backed by the game developer. And so players have professional contracts, they get paid by their organizations to play, and they travel a lot. And so having kind of this understanding of the professional pipeline, I think, is really important. Something I would like to mention is that esports, for those who are under the age of 18, especially professional esports, is really, really hard to get into, just because there's a lot of obstacles, especially once you get into that professional area, just because you have a lot of legal contracts, travel issues, funding issues. So that's something that I always like to mention as well, is if your student is super passionate about esports, I always recommend making sure they know to check, if there's any collegiate esports teams at any of the colleges that they want to go to first, because that will give them a lot of really good hands-on experience that typically is a lot cheaper and is also, a part of the school that they would be going to. So next is this lovely, lovely diagram, and this is the passion to profession. And essentially what this is 19 different pathways of how gaming could lead to different careers. And I like to bring this up because I want coaches to be able to understand that if a student has passion for gaming, they don't necessarily have to be, a professional player or a coach. They can be a broadcaster. They could be a game developer, a game designer. They can go into education. They can go into coaching, media, broadcast. There's so many different options that a lot of people don't realize. Esports, because it's such a massive and growing industry, there's a lot of things that go into it, especially, on the business side as well. It is a business, so there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. You got your communication management, you got your funding, it's really, really important to understand this so then you can help, encourage students along the way too. And so next I wanted to give a nice quote from a professional esports coach from the Cincinnati Fear. So this is Cal. He started his career as a player, and then he transitioned into coaching. And what he said was that he transitioned into coaching because he felt like he wasn't a super good player, but he was able to analyze stuff really, really well, which I find very funny. So his advice for coaches at all is, steal things from good coaches. Unironically, that way you'll become the best by learning from the best. And eventually you'll start adapting it into something of your own that fits the needs of the team and yourself. I just love this quote so much because it is really true about just, learning from other coaches and then, taking what they do at first and then slowly molding it into something that you have. So I mentioned in the beginning that there might be some trivia. So now there's going to be some trivia. And so I'm going to look into the chat to refer to, some of these answers. I'll give everyone like 10 to 15 seconds-ish to put your answers in the chat. Also, yes, this is recorded and it will be posted tomorrow. So gamer terminology. Do you know these 4 commonly used terms in gaming and esports? If you're an esports coach, you might know. You might hear this whispered around. I think these are 4 pretty commonly used terms, so it shouldn't be too bad. So the first one is meta. I'll give like 10 seconds to put in the chat what we think meta means. And this is for bragging rights, so points will not be recorded. So Meta is not just the owner of Facebook and Instagram, but Meta is a game's player base's current idea of the most optimal way to play the game. And a good example of this is playing newly released characters due to power creep. And power creep is another term I want to add. So power creep is essentially when newer released characters or game mechanics are stronger than original mechanics that were already released in the game. So the next term, which I mentioned early on, is IGL. What do we think IGL means? So, IGL, which I mentioned earlier, under like the leadership role, is in-game leader. So this is the person on the team that shot calls strategies. It's very different from coaching. Coaching, gives critiques, gives ideas, but the in-game leader is the person really like play calling while everything is happening. So the next term is going to be nerf. What do we think nerf means? I'll give it a little bit longer this time because I think we're on a bit of a delay. So, yes, I do see that somebody put that it makes a character or a weapon weaker. And if anybody was thinking the Plastic Dart Company, unfortunately they are wrong. Yes, so nerf is a balance adjustment the game developers release that makes a character, weapon, game mechanic less powerful. So I see that a few folks put that in the chat. That is absolutely correct. And calling back to the meta description, this is usually in response to power creep. Developers release a character. 2 weeks later, they find out it is way too strong. They gotta nerf it. And then the inverse of that is buffing. But I thought that was a little too self-explanatory. And so the last term, I'd say this is probably the hardest term on here, is ace. So what do we think ace means? So acing, or I guess to ace, not the suit. So typically used in a 5v5 game, acing means that a single player eliminated either like all 5 players of the opposing team in a single round or a single engagement. And the reason why I like ace so much as a term is because it actually has like real world origins. So in aviation fighting, a pilot is considered an ace after having 5 confirmed air eliminations. So I just find that's a really cool, like callback to a real world term is acing. So now I'm going to talk about some resources. Some of these you probably already know. And the first one that I always like to advocate for heavily more than anything else is surveying the students. If you're trying to gauge interest about anything or learn more, ask the students. I think most students would be very excited to discuss, gaming with really anybody, whether that's a coach or a parent or whatnot, especially if you show interest in it. So if you think that maybe you want to improve how, you show somebody something, or maybe some strategies in the game or whatnot, surveying the students is going to be really important, because they're the people who are also directly affected. Those players are the ones who, they're the ones that are going to know in this case. So a really fast one to go over what UC offers. Our doors here are always open to come and visit. So we are offering some esports scholarships coming soon. We have a strategic partnership with Esports Ohio and the Cincinnati Fear. We aid networking opportunities with industry professionals like Esports Ohio. We have an early IT program and camps for high school and middle school students who are interested in game design and coding. And then we also have a game design major through DAP and a couple other certificates through our colleges. So I'd like to thank everybody for their participation, and I'd like to give you this 30-second highlight of the UC Esports Innovation Lab. It's a place where you're invited to come connect, play, and compete before we open the floor for questions. And this also is a really good video to show kind of the energy of esports in case anybody has doubts. But if you're all here, I don't think anybody has doubts. Okay, I love that video. So now I'm going to open the floor up to some Q&A for like 10-15 minutes if anybody's interested. Just put your questions in the chat. I will gladly, try my best to respond with what I know. Also, we will be including contact information in the description of this recording once it's released tomorrow. So if you don't think of a question now and you think of something later, you can absolutely contact us. Yeah, absolutely. We can totally have somebody come in to speak to a high school class or anything like that. We'll have contact information in the description by tomorrow. So depending on where it is, because I know we sent this invitation out to a couple different like local high schools and also some that are out of state. Depending on where it is, we can potentially tune in for like an online thing as well. But contact information will be listed in the description for people to use. Suggestions about how to obtain equipment. Yes. So obtaining equipment is really going to come down to kind of the budget and the specs that you're looking for. I'd say if you're starting out your program, it's really on what the students are more interested in playing. So a really cheap alternative for like entering esports really early on in like a program's career is getting Switches, Nintendo Switches, because Super Smash Brothers is by far one of the most popular esports out there at the scholastic and really global scene. And it only requires like basically the game, the Switch, and then a TV to play on, and your students will go crazy over it. I absolutely recommend Super Smash Brothers as the first, way to go. If you're looking for, larger equipment like PCs, I guess it's also depending on if you're going for like enterprise models with like how many you're buying. So like the bare minimum for like an esports lab is going to be around 6 computers. In terms of brands, I really recommend Alienware. They have some pretty well priced computers for some pretty good specs, and they just released a new line recently that I think does really good. You can also do custom builds if you really want to do it on a budget from like Micro Center for fairly cheap, like under $1,000 per computer. Although you probably have to build them yourself, which I guess is the biggest downside to that. But yeah, Alienware is really great. If you're looking for something a little bit more flashy, I guess Razer, but I still suggest Alienware 100%. Oh, also, I forgot to mention about the equipment comment. The Cincinnati Fear is going to be doing in the future, like they'll have corporate support to introduce like esports labs to high schools in the area, in the areas in Ohio. So that is something that will be an opportunity later. I don't have a timeline on that, but if you contact us, we can probably give you some more information about that when we learn more. But if nobody else has any questions, which is totally fine if you can't think of anything, like I said a couple times, there's going to be contact information in the description. So if you absolutely want to contact us, we will have that for you. But I just wanted to say thank you, everybody who tuned in. Sorry about the early on mic issues. Entirely forgot that my mic was muted, but, you live and you learn. But thank you so much. Like I said, please feel free to contact us if you have any questions. My name's Gianna. I'm the Esports Innovation Lab coordinator here at UC. Esports is my passion. I hope everyone here, esports is also their passion, or at least one of their passions. I think it's an absolutely wonderful thing to bring into schools and to promote in schools. And it gives a lot of students an opportunity to do something great, even though they may not have thought of anything else. I know when I was in high school, if I had an esports team, that'd be the first thing I'd be drawn to. But yeah, thank you so much for watching.